Mary and Martha of Mississippi, the twin enslaved sisters who rose together in 1832, beheading their cruel overseer and etching vengeance into Southern legend. Riverbend Plantation, Natchez, Mississippi, July 1832. The bell tolled wrong that morning. It echoed over the cane fields with a stutter, a hesitation, as if the rope itself remembered something it could not speak. On Riverbend Plantation, such things were not mentioned. Not by name, not aloud. But every back knew the weight of that sound. Every eye turned briefly to the tower. Every hand faltered for one breath. That same morning, Abel Sutter arrived. He came with a ledger under one arm and a whip curled like a serpent on his belt. Fresh from Georgia, hired by Judge Ephraim Tolland himself, who, in his thinning years, saw cruelty not as a vice, but as policy. Sutter's boots struck the yard like verdicts. His eyes were pale, unblinking, like something carved from glass. And when he passed the twins in the rows, Mary and Martha, he stopped. They did not speak. They never had to. Their hands moved in rhythm, cutting cane faster than any pair on the plantation. Not just speed, synchronicity. Two bodies, one breath. That silence unsettled him more than defiance ever could. "Which one is which?" he asked a nearby boy. The boy shrugged. "Don't know. They don't answer if you get it wrong." Sutter stared. Mary's back was damp with sweat. Martha's scarred knuckles glistened in the sun. Identical in bone, in gait, in gaze. "That'll change," he muttered. That week, the quotas doubled. The nights grew longer. The food grew thinner. And Mary and Martha did not slow. By Sunday, he dragged Martha to the smithy and branded her on the shoulder with a curling M made from bent horseshoe iron. "To tell them apart," he said. She made no sound as it burned. Mary, watching from the shadows of the bell tower, did not blink. 2 nights later, Sutter stood outside the quarters, sipping from his silver flask. "One of you goes upriver come harvest," he said to no one. "Let's see how long the other one lasts." Mary touched her sister's shoulder that night. She did not speak. She did not cry. They only stared into the embers of the fire, waiting for the silence to end. The sun was white that day, so hot it burned shadows into the walls of the cane mill, left the air thick with the stink of boiling syrup and sweat. July's heat could make a man forget his name, make a woman pray for clouds that never came. But on Riverbend Plantation, no one prayed anymore. Not where prayers had been sold alongside blood. Inside the sugar mill, the rollers churned, wet with juice and iron. The machinery shrieked like it remembered screams. And behind it all stood Benaiah, old, bent, more scar than man. He had been born the same year the bell tower was raised, back when Riverbend still belonged to the Frenchman whose ghost now haunted only land deeds and dying ledgers. Benaiah fed the stock slowly, methodically, each movement careful. The others called him the bell's twin, for he was as old, as cracked, as constant. Mary often brought him water when she could cool from the pump, in a gourd with a wax plug. On that day, she saw the tremor in his wrist from across the yard. "Sutton's wrong," Martha muttered. Benaiah's eyes rolled back, and before the stock reached the press, he collapsed, hands scraping against the hot rollers, body jerking like a puppet with cut strings. Mary dropped the gourd and ran. The crash of the gourd hitting stone snapped through the heat. Water splashed across the floor. Then came the sound of boots. Sutter. He moved fast. Too fast. His baton was already in hand. Before Mary could reach Benaiah, he brought the baton down hard on the gourd, splintering it. Then on Benaiah's back, twice. "Leave him," Sutter barked. "Let the press take the rest. Let them learn." "No," Mary breathed. But that was all. Benaiah's hand twitched once. Then he was still. The press did not stop. It never did. Mary knelt, fingers reaching, but there was nothing left to save. His skin sizzled against the metal. The smell was worse than death. It was injustice made into steam. The other workers stood frozen. No one spoke. Not even Martha. Silence. And that silence held until dusk. That night, in the quarters, the air was thick with it. Not grief. Not yet. Something harder, heavier. Mary cleaned her hands with river water. Not to remove the blood. To remember it. Martha stood behind her, wrapped in a coarse linen shawl, her branded shoulder still swollen. She reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a small satchel, herbs, roots, things the others whispered about but never questioned. "Datura," she said. Mary didn't answer. "Not to kill. Not yet. But he'll stumble. Forget his legs. His voice'll fail him first." Still, Mary said nothing. But her hands stopped shaking. The two sat beside the dying fire. Martha crushed the seeds into powder with the back of a spoon. She added sage to mask the taste, dried mint for bitterness, bark scraped from the quarter's rafters. All of it went into a folded scrap of waxcloth, tied tight with string from an old bonnet. The others watched without turning their heads. Outside, the bell in the tower swayed gently in the warm breeze. No one rang it. But the silence was over. The plan began with observation. Sutter was a creature of rut and ego. Every day at noon, he visited the gin shed to count ledgers and ration slips. Every afternoon around 5, he passed the boathouse and took a pull from his flask, sometimes two. At night, he made a full round, bell tower to smokehouse, smokehouse to slave quarters, quarters back to the shed. Like clockwork. Like pride. Mary followed him at a distance, always with a bucket or a bundle of wood, so no one asked why she was near. Martha lingered by the cookhouse, pretending to grind cassava. Neither sister spoke much. They didn't need to. By the third day, they knew the gaps in his rhythm. They set the plan for the following Thursday, when the river would be highest, and the wind strong enough to carry screams down current, not upriver. The boathouse, surrounded by cypress, offered cover and current both. Mary would loosen the bell striker, just enough to make it ring wrong when the time came. A missed note. A missed beat. Enough to skew a timeline. Martha would doctor the flask, datura and mint, sealed again with a pinch of ash to hide the tampering. He would never taste it. But they needed a distraction. At sundown, a young boy named Josiah was told to stage a rope break at the pulley behind the boathouse. Loud enough to hear. Subtle enough not to draw a crowd. "Make it sound like an accident," Mary instructed. Josiah didn't ask why. He only nodded. That night, in the far corner of the quarters, Martha stitched a small pouch into the hem of her skirt. Inside, a butcher's cleaver stolen from the smokehouse, wrapped in oiled cloth. Sharp. Heavy. She tested its weight. Outside, a whip cracked in the distance. But for once, the sound didn't make her flinch. Mary sharpened a caulking mallet behind the smithy, choosing it not for blood, but for control, flat, broad, quiet. Less spray. Less mess. It would be her hand that struck first. The sisters didn't sleep that night. They lay on their backs beneath the rafters, eyes open, ears tuned to the breathing of others. One by one, they listened as the quarters drifted into uneasy rest. In the dark, Martha whispered, "They'll say it was madness." Mary answered, "Let them." The next morning, the cane rustled strange in the wind. Benaiah was gone. The gourd was gone. But the silence he left behind that stayed. And the bell. The bell waited. July 19th, 1832. The air over the Mississippi held the thickness of thunder, though no clouds moved above the water. Riverbend's evening sky was bronze, wet with waiting. Crickets had begun their low chorus, and the smell of river mud rose like breath from an open mouth. Abel Sutter stood at the edge of the boathouse dock, one boot propped on a timber pile, the other balanced with the arrogance of a man who believed the world owed him stillness. His silver flask gleamed in the dusk. He drank. The liquor struck fast. Datura had no taste once masked, only heat that crept behind the eyes and weight that slipped down the spine. He blinked. His hand twitched. The second sip staggered him. Martha was already there. She stood behind the half-closed door of the skiff shack, just out of view, one foot resting on the step, her shawl drawn over her arms though the heat was suffocating. The adze in her hand was ancient, blackened from fire, sharpened not for show but for work. It had once built canoes. Tonight it would end a man. Mary approached from the gin path, arms loose, mallet hidden inside a canvas sling knotted to her waist. The belt snap had already been staged. Josiah had done it well, cord twisted, pulley jammed. The noise had pulled Sutter from his ledger. The flask had done the rest. He swayed now, peering into the boathouse shadows. "Who's there?" Mary said nothing. Sutter took one step forward, squinting. The flask slipped from his hand and clinked against the dock, rolling just to the edge. He bent to reach it. That was when Mary moved. The mallet struck the back of his skull with a sound like a fruit breaking underfoot, thick, low, not loud. He crumpled sideways, one knee buckling, the other locking. His voice caught in his throat, a stammered grunt, more confused than hurt. She struck again. This time he dropped fully, face first against the planks, his arms twitching. Martha stepped from the shadows. Her adze gleamed once in the low light before she raised it high, turned it blade down, and brought it down into the side of his neck, angled, precise. The wound opened without a scream. The breath in his lungs had already gone to memory. He spasmed once. They worked quickly. Mary rolled him onto his back. Martha took the cleaver from her skirt, the smokehouse butcher's blade, heavy and wide, stolen 3 nights earlier. Its edge had been oiled with pork fat to slow rust. She placed the point at the base of Sutter's throat. One stroke. Not clean. Not poetic. But final. His head came free with 2 hacks, the last one cracking the bone with a sound that made Mary's stomach twist, not from fear, but from memory. The same sound the rollers made when sugarcane cracked under pressure. They moved in rhythm. The head went into the iron-bound ledger chest that Sutter kept at the boathouse, where he tallied rations, punishments, missed quotas. Mary stuffed the broken brand, the same iron that had marked Martha's shoulder, into his mouth. The cleaver followed. They closed the chest. The torso they dragged down the pilings. The river took the blood, pulled it into the current like a secret. The sisters scrubbed the dock with handfuls of river mud, the grit eating at their hands until the wood ran clean. Their clothes went into the tar bucket behind the net shed. Flames rose blue. By the time the bell sounded its next note wrong, as Mary had arranged, both girls were back in the quarters, separate, silent, breathing in unison. No one saw them pass. But the bell tolled wrong. And that was enough. The alarm rose before midnight. Shouts. Lanterns. The overseer's quarters lit with firelight. Dogs barking. Boots in the dirt. And inside the big house, Judge Ephraim Tolland roused from his drink to hear a servant say, "The overseer's gone, sir. Vanished." By morning, the chest was found. Blood pooled beneath it. The head inside. Ledger pages soaked and stained. The brand jammed in the mouth like a final sermon. Sutter's name was scratched through on the top sheet. Beneath it, another page planted. One that suggested accounts falsified, rations stolen, counterfeit scrip slipped into the payroll. Tolland read it twice, his lips dry. The slaves had not rebelled. The whites had turned on each other. That was the whisper passed that day. Mary sat near the quarter's fire, her hands wrapped in linen to hide the burns from the tar bucket. Martha stood near the door, watching the smoke rise from the chimneys. They did not speak. They did not need to. The bell tolled again at noon. Wrong again. And still, no one corrected it. By dusk, the boathouse stood empty. The chest had been taken. The blood washed into the river. But the smell remained. Salt. Ash. Iron. And silence broken. The summer deepened. Riverbend, once ruled by routine, now stirred like something bitten. The overseer was gone. The ledger chest, once locked and sanctified, now bore the memory of a severed head. Whispers moved faster than water, faster than the truth, slower than forgetting. By the end of the week, Judge Tolland summoned help. Calhoun Pike arrived in a dust storm. Sheriff of Washington County. A man known for his speed with a whip and his stillness with a smile. Tall, with a mustache trimmed like a blade and eyes like well water, deep, cold, and never full. He came on horseback, trailing 2 deputies and a dog with a nose for sweat. The slaves were gathered that evening under torchlight. Pike stood on a crate made from molasses crates, whip coiled at his side. "Confess now and the rest will live." No one moved. He pulled down a man named Otis, the blacksmith. Heavy hands, heavier breath. The kind of man Sutter used to threaten without real intent. Pike lashed him 12 times before the crowd. The whip bit the skin like it remembered old wars. Otis didn't speak. Next was Josiah, the boy who'd staged the pulley break. They found the frayed rope, still knotted with his handwriting. He denied nothing, but said even less. "I ain't seen no one," he said. "Just heard the bell toll wrong." That phrase came back again and again. The bell tolls wrong. In Pike's mind, wrong bells meant bad clocks or liars. He began sleeping in the big house, keeping Sutter's flask by his bed. Not to honor him. To remember what was stolen. By the third day, suspicion turned to the riverman. A half-free named Emery Clark, who delivered barrels by skiff twice a week. His ledger was clean, but his eyes were not. Someone claimed they saw him near the boathouse that night. Another claimed he owed Sutter coin. A third said nothing, only nodded when Pike asked. Clark vanished that night. No trial. But the killings didn't stop the whispers. The dog caught scent again by the tower. Near the bell. And in the quarters, a child no older than 5 spoke in her sleep. Her mother tried to hush her, but Pike overheard. "Saw 2 shadows," the child murmured. "Walkin' like one. By the river." The word struck like a bullet wrapped in cotton. He demanded the name of the child. The mother wept, refused. Pike took her anyway, back torn open by dawn. Now all eyes turned to the twins. Mary and Martha had spoken little since the killing. Less than usual. They moved apart during the day, worked separate rows, answered questions with silence. But too many eyes had watched them move for too many years. Their sameness was no longer camouflage, it was a mark. On the 7th day, Pike brought them before Judge Tolland himself. The judge's office was humid with liquor and the weight of failure. He read from a page he hadn't written. His voice was thick, not with guilt, but with dread. "Someone must hang," he said. Pike agreed. The twins were silent. He questioned them for an hour. Then 2. No answers. No confession. Not even when he brought the lash and offered mercy for names. Mary looked at him once. Only once. "I saw nothing," she said. He turned to Martha. "And you?" She did not blink. "She lies," she whispered. Pike narrowed his eyes. "So it was you?" "No," Martha said. "She lies to protect me." Tolland stood then. "Enough." The room quieted. "I've seen this before," the judge muttered, rubbing his temple. "Twins think they're one soul in 2 bodies. Kill one, you wound the other. But keep both? You birth a legend." He turned away from the desk. Looked out at the fields, gold with late cane, still, waiting. "Hang both," he said. "And hang the rumor with them." The jury took 12 minutes. They did not speak aloud. They did not look the twins in the eye. Only one man paused before signing. His hand trembled. But he signed. Guilty. By silence. By shadow. By fear. That night, Mary braided Martha's hair in the corner of the holding room. They had not spoken since the verdict. They did not need to. The rope had already been tied. The platform was already built. And far beyond Riverbend, the river flowed like it always had, slow, strong, hungry. In the quarters, the bell was silent. Too silent. As if it, too, were holding its breath. December 3rd, 1832. Natchez, Mississippi. The morning began colder than any in memory. Frost sheathed the railings of the courthouse like bone ash. The hanging tree in the square wore no leaves, only silence. By dawn, a crowd had gathered, merchants in wool coats, slave catchers with their dogs, women in mourning veils pretending to pity. The square smelled of tobacco spit, cedar smoke, and waiting. Mary and Martha were brought in chains. Their dresses were pale gray, threadbare. Their feet bare against the frozen boards of the gallows. Sheriff Calhoun Pike stood behind them, boots polished, rope coiled in one hand, Bible in the other. He had not shaved. His eyes were red. He read no scripture. The twins did not speak. A priest approached to offer last rites. Mary turned her head. Martha closed her eyes. The priest, confused, withdrew. The first rope went to Mary. She stood without tremble. Her hands were tied in front, not behind, Judge Tolland's only mercy. A new rope. Fresh wound. Greased with tallow. Pike checked the knot twice. A man whispered in the crowd, "She don't look afraid." Another muttered, "It's the quiet ones that carry ghosts." Pike gave the signal. The trapdoor dropped. The rope snapped. The sound tore the morning open like a shot. The crowd gasped as Mary's body hit the ground hard, shoulders crumpling, breath knocked from her lungs, but not life. A pause. A murmur. Then chaos. Some claimed it was a sign. Others cried sabotage. The judge shouted for order. Mary lay still, eyes open, not crying, not moving. Pike cursed. He climbed down, checked her pulse. Still breathing. Still watching. He reset the noose himself. This time, he used the old rope. The one that smelled of mildew and sweat, the one used last spring for a thief from Port Gibson. He tied it tighter. No error now. He looked to the judge. Tolland nodded once. Then Mary turned to her sister. And Martha turned to her. They spoke together. One voice. One breath. "We die as women, not property." The second drop ended it. Both bodies hung still. The sky above Natchez turned a pale white, like paper soaked in milk. The wind did not rise. The birds did not return to the tree for 3 days. The town clerk wrote the event as twinned execution of twin murderesses. The papers ran the story under names that were not theirs. 2 negresses hang for killing overseer. One account called it witchcraft. Another called it hysteria. A third claimed the women had seduced Sutter and killed him in jealousy. But none told the truth. The truth lived elsewhere. It lived at Riverbend. That winter, no overseer lasted more than a month. One quit in the night, leaving behind his boots. Another fled after finding the ledger chest cracked open again, empty, but for a single length of broken chain. The third hung himself by the boathouse, muttering about bells. The plantation's profits dipped, then broke, then stopped. By the spring of 33, Judge Tolland leased the fields to a man from New Orleans who insisted on new hands, new rows, new names. But the ground never yielded the same. The boathouse rotted down to stumps. But the bell remained. And it began to toll wrong again. At first, they blamed the wind. Then birds. Then bad metal. But every time a fog rolled in from the river and the bell's tone dipped out of rhythm, one beat too early, one beat too late, something else happened. A barrel came loose from its moorings. A scythe split without warning. A white child went missing for an hour and returned screaming of women in the water. The elders whispered first. Then the boatmen. Then the merchants. They said the river carried memory. They said the bell remembered blood. They said the twins had not died, not truly. That every wrong toll was accounting. Mary and Martha. Counting the debt. One beat for the brand. One for the gourd. One for the broken neck. Some claimed they saw figures walking the riverbank at night, twin shadows, barefoot, heads bowed, hands clasped. Some heard weeping where no one stood. Others heard nothing at all, and that was worse. Years passed. A new name was carved over the old gate at Riverbend. But the cane never grew tall again. Not like before. The roots had changed. The riverbank, once used for baptisms, was abandoned. And the bell tower leaned further each year, like a body too tired to hold up its own history. In 1855, a preacher's wife tried to ring the bell before a wedding. It cracked in her hands. She lost the child that winter. No one rang it again. The name Abel Sutter faded. Judge Tolland died in his sleep, mouth open, eyes wide. Calhoun Pike lost his badge and vanished upriver. But the tale did not die. Children learned it as a warning. Mothers told it as a shield. And across the delta, whenever the fog curled thick over the water and the bell struck out of time, boatmen whispered the same prayer, not to God, but to memory. Let the debt be paid. Let the sisters rest. But the ledger, they say, still breathes. And the river still listens. Because some stories are not buried. Some names are not burned. And some silence is only waiting for the right kind of scream. The rows had shifted. The fields curved wrong now, as though the land itself had turned away from the past. No cane grew tall by the boathouse. No laughter stirred from the quarters. And the bell, long cracked, long silent, still hung crooked in its tower, shadowed by ivy and rust. But sometimes it moved. No wind. No hand. just motion. The new overseer, Whitman Gray, lasted 2 weeks. He was a thick man with a whip like a spine and a gaze that counted backs before faces. On his 13th night, he heard footsteps beneath the boathouse, bare, twin, echoing in rhythm. He searched by torchlight, found nothing, returned shaking. On the 14th, he found the ledger room open, though no key had been turned. On the 15th, he fled, said nothing, left everything. They hired another, then another, and another. By 1860, the house had fallen into partial ruin. The judge's grandson, drunk with war fever, came to stay. He laughed at the legends. He called them Negro folk fables, swamp superstition. He rang the bell himself one night in mockery. 3 nights later, he was found in the mud by the dock alive, but silent. He never spoke again, just stared at his hands over and over as though counting something he could no longer hold. That same year, a man named Elijah Harper, once enslaved at Riverbend, now a preacher, returned with his family. He had walked from Vicksburg with nothing but a Bible wrapped in oilcloth and a memory like fire. When he reached the gate, he did not knock. He climbed the fence and stood where the bell tower cast no shadow. There he knelt and prayed, not for vengeance, not for peace, but for remembrance. He placed a wooden cross at the edge of the dock, carved not with names, but with symbols, 2 circles joined by a line. Beneath it, in chalk, 1 word, counted. When white folk asked what it meant, he only said, some debts were paid in full. Others still come due. During the war, Riverbend changed hands 4 times. Confederates used it for supply. Union scouts passed through but wouldn't stay the night. One sergeant carved a message into the frame of the bell tower before leaving. Heard the bell toll once. Nothing above. No wind. No rope. Just sound. No one stayed after that. After emancipation, the freedmen returned not as property, but as kin. Some came to bury the past. Others came to see it bleed. The boathouse had collapsed by then, but the pilings remained black wood jutting from water like broken teeth. The ledger chest was gone. Or so they believed. Until 1874, when a boy diving for mussels found something heavy sunk in the mud near the base of the tower. They pulled it up slow. Rust ate through the hinges. Inside, damp paper, smeared ink, a tooth. Just one. And beneath the pages, wrapped in burlap, the brand. The same iron Sutter had pressed to Martha's shoulder. Bent. Broken. Cold. The chest was burned. The ashes thrown into the river. But still the bell moved. By 1890, Riverbend was legend. Farmers wouldn't plant on its soil. Hunters avoided its woods. Only the desperate lingered. And only the dead remained quiet. In Natchez, an old woman named Dinah told children the story of 2 sisters who killed for justice and became missed. She showed them her shoulder scarred, not by iron, but by fire. She said she'd been there. Said she'd seen the flame in Martha's eyes as they dragged her up the steps. The children asked, what did they say before the rope? And Dinah, every time, gave the same answer. We die as women, not property. Those words lived longer than any law.